is have one of these 4 variations. So either variation 2, variation 3, variation 5, or variation 6. I'll ask you to discuss that variation. I'll have the score there for you, but I want it to be a pretty thorough description of, what's going on. You'll notice in all 4 of those particular variations that Beethoven does not use double bars and repeats. So he does use double bars and repeats in the first variation and in the 4th variation, but not in 2, 3, 5, and 6. All right. So if you look at that list of, the handout here from the website that you downloaded, and you should have that, where you can look at that. So I have at the top, analyze the harmonic progression of the theme, because you're going to want to compare. That's one of the things with the variation. So we're going to put up a list of questions here as far as how that particular variation compares to the theme. So you're looking at the harmony. So, and in general, is it the same? It's not going to be exactly the same, but is the overall harmonic structure basically the same or not? So that's basically, the way that you approach talking about a theme of variation movement is that you're going to compare each variation to the theme, what's the same, what's different, and then you look for, general features that might group, several variations together. Like you might have, 3 or 4 variations. If it's the bigger movement that maybe has, say it has 20 variations in total. It can start out with that, animation of the rhythm at the beginning, like we saw with Mozart. It can carry that even, to more variations. But that's what you're basically trying to do. What's the same as the theme? What's different? So, harmony, and then phrasing. Does it have the same number of phrases? We're going to see one of the variations where it doesn't have the same number of phrases. And so you're going to try then, whenever you see something like that, you then have to ask the question, why? You can usually figure out a reason why. So that's one thing to look for. And then you're wanting to look at the texture. And so, as I mentioned, basically this is a homophonic texture, the presentation of the theme. Voices are more or less moving in the same rhythmic pace. You basically have chords on every quarter note, and you have some eighth notes in the melody in the top voice, but more or less homorhythmic. And so we're going to see some variations then where you have some contrapuntal elements, and that's not unusual for late Beethoven. So you're always kind of looking for that with late Beethoven works. Is he using some counterpoint or not? And so we'll see some variations that use invertible counterpoint. So if you can review that term and what that had to do with. So it's that taking 2 voices, and then upper voice becomes the lower voice becomes the upper voice, and they switch positions. That's called double counterpoint when you have 2 voices, or if you've got 3 voices, they're all being rearranged, that would be triple counterpoint. But that's an example of a polyphonic texture. So you're looking for textural elements in this. And Does the variation use double bars and repeats? I've already mentioned that. In those variations that don't have double bars and repeats, then what's happening? All right, and then we can look to see elements having to do with the tempo, the temporal elements. So you can see at the beginning, as I mentioned, andante is the general tempo marking. Variation 1 is marked molto espressivo, so basically it's the same tempo, it's just even more expressive. And so forth. You can see when you get to variation 3, then it says allegro vivace. So, wow, that's unexpected. So, what happens in that variation? Variation 4, it says a little less andante and more adagio than the theme. So in other words, a little bit slower than the original tempo of the theme. And he writes in German somewhat slower than the theme. So that has a tempo shift. Variation 5 is something that is not written into the Schenker edition. So that is on page 570, the bottom of the page. So you should know that's variation 5 where it says allegro ma non troppo. So allegro but not too much. And so that for sure is a tempo change. And then you look at the last variation, which is on page 572. And that then says back to the tempo of the theme. We want to pay really close attention to what's happening rhythmically in variation 6. There's some really, really incredible things going on here. You want to see how Beethoven, takes, these different components and he manipulates them one at a time to animate the rhythm and to intensify the way that this theme, is transformed and creates the climax of this entire sonata. It's an amazing final variation. So we're looking for those elements, and then you want to just talk about, kind of what's going on. One of the things that I wrote at the bottom, so I've listed some of these things up here: harmonic structure, phrasing, motivic connections, the texture, rhythmic comparisons, so that especially look at the final variation I just mentioned. The element of contrast, so that has to do with the tempo, but that affects, the character. And the use of repeat signs, and the length of the variation and how it compares to the theme. So, overall song form of the theme, if you look at that, it's just going to be in a, extended 2-part song form. It doesn't have in the third phrase, it's contrasting. So all 4 phrases are contrasting. And so it's like A, B, that's repeated, and then C, D, that's repeated. So pretty straightforward. but you want to get a really good feel for how each variation relates to the theme. So, if we look for just a second at variation 1, because that's one of the ones you're not going to look at. It's not one of the ones I'll ask you on final, but you should know what happens here. Basically, the theme is in the middle of the keyboard, and he's going to expand the range in this first variation. So we saw the range of the melody in the second half. That's the highest note, that E right there. So that's all. Basically within a sixth, a minor sixth. So really a very limited range. It's very expressive and beautiful. So now in the first variation, then he extends the range. So one thing that I also want you to look for in this just has to do with the way the bass line it's basically an ascending scale. It starts with that, skip of a third. It's just moving up primarily by step. Look for that in some of the variations. He's going to continue. When you get to the second variation, so you can find that. All right, first variation, he just basically is going to embellish the melody. And it's kind of like a waltz bass in left hand. In the second half of the theme, when you get to measure 8, you're looking for that German 6th chord. He doesn't do that here. He does have a G natural sounding, but basically it's a 5 of 5, 5, 7, 5. Second ending. Now, in this second half, the expressive part of it really comes into play with the chromaticism. So you hear. So you hear those chromatic passing tones. You're expecting this to cadence on G sharp minor. Right there, G sharp minor. Now, he really expands the range. He takes it up into that top register. There's that falling third. That, and so forth. So really the first variation is the one that's the closest to the theme, the least amount of change. So I want you to think about the variation that I've assigned to you, and then we will get together and talk about this. So that's the plan. And listen to the work. You want to have it in your ear. That's one of the most important things, is to know exactly what it is you're analyzing, that you can hear it. So this Barenboim recording, I love that recording on YouTube. There's lots of great recordings of it, but I would recommend that you listen to it, several times, and you'll start to see more and more things as you dig into it. All right, so we're going to stop there and let you do a little analyzing, and then we'll get together and see what you come up with.